So had the walls, and so had the castle. And Thor began to feel a lot better. He had been beaten, but not disgraced. "Come on," he said to his friends. "It's time to get back to Asgard. We've got a story to tell them. A story fit for the gods."
This was the scene at York last February. Ships from the Isle of Man in the north of England were competing against ships from Norway. It was all part of a modern-day Viking festival, and of course they just had to hold a Viking boat race. I say of course because the Vikings were some of the finest ever seen. And there was one particular kind of boat that was famous above all others. This was the longship, the kind of boat that they would use for war, for raiding Lindisfarne or invading England. And when the wind was just right, they would haul up this single square sail and just bowl along. But if there wasn't any wind, or perhaps if the wind threatened to blow them backwards, well, they would just take out the oars and row. There were about 16 of these on either side. The Vikings would keep their possessions in these trunks. They would also use them as seats for when they were rowing, and it helped to save space. And on the right-hand side of the boat was the rudder, or as they called it, the steerboard. And that word has survived in our language right up till now. Well, almost, because we don't call the right-hand side of the boat the steerboard side, we call it the starboard side. We know a lot about Viking ships thanks to the work of archaeologists. A few years ago, they found the remains of 5 ships at the bottom of the sea, just off the coast of Denmark. They walled off the area to keep the sea out, and then very carefully began to clean the mud off the sections of the ships. Once the sections had been cleaned, they were taken away to be reassembled and put in a museum. They found an even better preserved example on dry land. Important Vikings were often buried inside their ships, and that's what had happened in this case. After they had dug it out, this too was put on display in a museum. It's called the Gokstad ship. Viking ships were built for a purpose, but they were also labours of love. Take the Gokstad ship. When you look at its elegant lines and its wonderful carved decorations, you can see why some people have called it the most beautiful ship ever built. Not long ago, the people of Norway decided to build a replica of the ship. This too was a labour of love, and a way of paying respect to their Viking ancestors. As far as possible, they used the same tools as the Viking shipbuilders had used, and they took the same care over the workmanship. Once the boat was finished, they held a launching ceremony. And once the boat had been launched, they took it out for its first trials. They had a crew of experienced oarsmen, and the ship performed very well when they rowed it. And when they hoisted the sail, it went even better. The new boat fairly skimmed over the waves. The children of Glasburn School decided to have a go at building their own Viking ships.
You do the cardboard one? Yeah.
Different children used different materials. Some experimented with polystyrene meat trays. Others cut the shape of the ship out of card. And some decided to use balsa wood. After making the body of the ship, it was time to decorate it. And once they'd finished their boats, they tested them on water to see which ones worked best. They gave them speed trials.
7 seconds.
Each boat had to cross the same stretch of water, driven by the same wind source, a battery-powered fan. Each crossing was timed with a stopwatch.
6 seconds.
And each result was carefully noted down on a clipboard.
Lynn Smith.
Some boats had a bit of a struggle to finish the course.
Yeah! 16 seconds.
And some never made it at all. And it was the best designed ship.
Five seconds.
And the Golden Longship Award for the best designed boat goes to Samantha Hawke with a winning time of 5 seconds.
As you discovered last week, the Vikings weren't just warriors. They were a race of craftsmen. And Viking trading ships would take their goods all over Europe. Jorvik itself became one of the biggest trading centres in the north of Europe. There would be a constant stream of merchant ships going down the River Ouse to the sea. From there, one of the most popular trade routes took them across the sea towards Scandinavia. They went on to Russia, and at this point they followed the rivers and the overland route that led them past Kiev, across the Black Sea and down to the great city of Constantinople. Another route took them even further afield. They headed down through the Caspian Sea. Then they crossed the desert by camel to Baghdad. And finally, they ended up in Jerusalem. Yes, those Vikings were great travelers, and often they